My name is Alex. I'm 34 years old, and I recently bought a house. I had always dreamed of having my own home, a garage, and a yard. My dream came true, but I never imagined my move would be one of the most unsettling and frightening days of my life. I work for a large company founded by my friend. I'm an excellent programmer and make very good money. I don't know if I could have made my dream come true working for another company, but the fact remains, I bought a house. It's not a mansion, just an ordinary suburban home. Luckily, I don't have to commute to the office every day. I've been working on my computer from my own room for a long time now. And then the moving day came. There's nothing special to tell about it. I think it was just like anyone else's move. By the evening, I hadn't unpacked anything except one plate and a mug. I needed to set up my sleeping space. I made the bed, and when I checked the time, I realized it was already 11 p.m. I decided to leave the rest of the unpacking for tomorrow after work. But before going to bed, I wanted to take a walk and get some fresh air. I stepped outside, and at that moment, it hit me. I was going to see this place every day now. I planned to get to know my neighbors and maybe invite someone over for a housewarming. I stood there imagining my new life when I noticed an old woman walking along the sidewalk by the road. She caught my attention because she looked very strange. She had a large hiking backpack on her back, short hair, and an old black tracksuit. She looked really odd. She was walking down the sidewalk when she suddenly stopped, picked up some kind of stuffed toy from the ground, and kept walking. I watched her, and at some point, it seemed like she realized I was looking at her. She paused for a couple of seconds, then walked on. Soon she disappeared behind the houses and I didn't see her again. Very strange woman, I thought to myself, and went to bed. The night went fine, even though I usually have trouble sleeping in a new place. I got up, set up my desk, put my laptop on it, and had breakfast. I started working almost immediately since I had spent the last 3 days dealing with the move. All day I was finishing up our new website, occasionally taking breaks for lunch. About once an hour, I stepped outside to get some fresh air. By 6 p.m., I had finished working. My new refrigerator was empty, so I ordered food delivery. At that time, I didn't have my own car yet, so I couldn't go to the store myself. While I was waiting for the courier, I decided to unpack the rest of my things. About 5 minutes later, there was a knock at my front door. I immediately thought it was the courier, but how could he have arrived so quickly? I went to the door and opened it. Standing in front of me was an old woman. I was so startled that I didn't know what to say. At first, I didn't recognize her. It was the same woman I had seen yesterday. She was dressed differently now, wearing an old headscarf and a dirty old dress. She reeked of urine. I asked her what she wanted, but she didn't answer. The old woman stretched out her hand and gave me an old doll. Then, without a word, she turned around and left. I closed the door and looked closely at the doll. It was dirty and missing one arm. I immediately threw it in the trash. Through the window, I watched where the old woman went and saw her walk toward the neighbor's house. A man came out and started yelling at her. He threatened her and said if she came back again, he would call the cops. Very strange day. I went back to unpacking my things and waited for the courier to arrive with my food. An hour passed, but no one came. I called the delivery service, but no one picked up the phone. This day was getting stranger and stranger. I had already unpacked everything and was very hungry. I decided to walk to the supermarket and buy myself something quick to make. I went outside and headed to the store on foot. I walked slowly. It was around 8 p.m. The sunset was beautiful that day. I followed the same path the old woman had taken the day before and stopped near the spot where she had picked up the old stuffed toy. In that spot lay a toy car. I picked it up and, for some reason, put it in my pocket. I don't know why I needed that toy car. I just felt like taking it. When I got to the store, I received a notification on my phone that my order had been delivered. I started heading back home, but before that, I grabbed some Korean noodles. It was already almost dark outside, but our neighborhood had plenty of streetlights. I walked, thinking about why that old woman was leaving children's toys everywhere. The thought wouldn't leave me alone, especially since one of her toys was in my pocket. I approached my house and noticed something strange. The only street light that wasn't on was the one in front of my house. On the porch was a large bag of food, but a few drinks had fallen out onto the ground. I picked it up and went inside. It was dark inside, and the lights wouldn't turn on. It seemed like a power outage. I set the bag on the table and went down to the basement with my flashlight on. I turned the power back on and started walking up the stairs. At that moment, I noticed someone pass by upstairs near the entrance. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but then I heard footsteps. I realized I might have forgotten to lock the front door. I wasn't sure, but I knew for certain that someone was in the house. I slowly went upstairs and peeked out from the doorway. In my kitchen stood that same old woman, rummaging through my bags of food. At one point, she almost noticed me, but I managed to hide in the darkness. The woman looked in my direction and slowly walked outside. I didn't call the police, but I felt extremely uneasy staying in the house after that. I immediately locked the door and kept thinking for a long time about what she could have been looking for, and only one idea came to mind. The next day, I returned the toy car to its place, and I don't know if that was the reason or just a coincidence, but that woman never came to my house again. I saw her often over the course of a year, but she never approached my home again, or at least I never noticed if she did. Hi everyone, my name is Rachel. This is my story about how I experienced a real-life nightmare. 4 years ago, my grandmother died, and I wish I could say I felt deep pain and sadness. But no, I never spoke to her. We always had a very cold relationship, and I barely knew her. She lived in a small town in a nursing home, and I had to go there for the funeral. I stayed in a motel. The town was very small, and the motel didn't look anything like the ones in big cities. The building was old, and my room looked like no one had cleaned it in years. The only good thing was that the bed linens were clean. I unpacked my things and went to sleep. The trip was long, and I was very tired, so I fell asleep right away. In the morning, I woke up early. I got dressed and went out to buy myself some coffee. Damn, it was such a gloomy day, and the coffee was awful. Today was the day of the funeral, and I felt terrible. I went back to my room and sat on the bed. I tried to text my friend on Instagram, but there was no signal here. The internet didn't work at all, and even to make a call, I had to go outside. I sat in my room and just waited. An hour later, I started getting ready for the funeral and put on all black. I grabbed my things and went to the door. Damn, an old lady was standing in front of me. "Who are you and what do you want?" I asked. I didn't hear an answer from her. The old woman just stood there silently, as if she didn't even understand where she was. It was very strange, but I was in a hurry and couldn't stay. I walked out, closed the door, and left. The woman kept standing there, watching me leave. I couldn't get that old woman out of my head for a long time, but at the funeral, I forgot about her. A lot of relatives came, people I never talked to, and they all seemed fake to me because they were crying. I knew they didn't care about my grandmother. They only cared about her belongings and apartment. I knew I wasn't going to get anything in the will, but I still felt sad because she and I never managed to fix our relationship. After the funeral, people stood around talking to each other, but I got into a taxi right away and went back to the motel. I only needed to spend one night here. In the morning, they would read the will, and I would go home. I decided to take a little walk around the town, but quickly realized there was nothing to do here, so I went back to the motel. I decided to get some coffee, and while I was waiting for it to be ready, I noticed the same woman from that morning standing on the other side of the road. She was standing there, staring at me. I took my coffee and went to my room. I didn't understand what that old woman wanted from me. I went into my room and sat down at the small table to drink my coffee. My room had a small window with a view directly onto the road. I saw that the woman was still standing there. It started to make me uneasy, so I closed the blinds. Until the evening, I just read my book until I got hungry. Not far from the motel, there was a roadside cafe, and I decided to go there. It was already dark. There were few people outside. and the population here was only about 3,000 people. I went into the cafe and ordered a pizza, planning to eat it back in my motel room. I sat down at a table and waited for it to be ready. At that moment, I already had the feeling that I was constantly being watched. This strange feeling had started when I first saw that old woman. I felt a bit uneasy. The funeral and this old woman were creating a constant sense of anxiety in my mind. My order was ready, and I decided to ask the waitress if she knew anything about that old woman. She told me I shouldn't stay in town too long, that the people here weren't the friendliest. I planned to follow her advice in the morning. I went back to my room at the motel. I started unlocking the door when I heard a strange sound behind me, like something had fallen. I went into my room and started eating the pizza. Suddenly, I heard another noise outside. The blinds on the window were closed, so I couldn't see outside. I kept eating, but a few seconds later, there was another scraping sound. I listened closely and heard footsteps. Someone was slowly walking toward my room. I thought it might be a new guest, but the sound of footsteps stopped. Someone was standing right outside my door. I got up and went to the window. I slightly opened the blinds and saw the old woman staring directly at the door, and then unexpectedly she turned her gaze toward me. I was terrified and didn't know what to do. That creepy old woman kept standing at the door. I didn't want to open it and just hoped she would go away. I started having either a breakdown or a panic attack. After a couple of minutes, I pulled myself together and realized there was nothing to be afraid of. I walked to the door and opened it, but there was no one outside. On the ground lay an envelope containing a letter. It was from my grandmother. She apologized and expressed regret for not speaking to me, for all the time she had wasted and could never get back. She left me her apartment and her will because the others didn't deserve it. As I read the letter, I started to cry. I went outside and looked around, hoping to find that woman, but she was nowhere to be seen. I don't know who she was or why she acted the way she did, but I was deeply grateful to her, not because I now had an apartment, but because she gave me the chance to forgive my grandmother. Hey everyone, I'm Clark. This happened to me 2 years ago. I never thought I'd end up in a situation like this. I was living the carefree life of a college student. I went to lectures, lived in the dorm, partied, hung out with friends and girls. No real worries. Then one day my mom called and asked me to come home right away, even though I hadn't finished my semester. My college let you pause classes for family emergencies, but I didn't want to do that. I drove home over the weekend and got terrible news. My grandmother had died. Her funeral was in a few days, but there was more. Grandma had been living with her own mother, my great-grandmother Maria, who had long suffered from dementia. For those days, great-grandma was brought to my parents' house. Mom had to travel out of town to arrange the funeral, and she gave me an important assignment. I was to stay for 3 days and look after Maria. Not exactly my ideal weekend. I'd missed the funeral, and even though Grandma and I hadn't always been close, I agreed. I asked for the time off and Mom and her husband left, carefully explaining my duties. Feed Maria, help her to the bathroom, and tuck her in each night. She barely understood anything, only answering simple questions like, "Do you want to watch TV?" Mom left, and my shift began. I led Maria into the living room and sat her in the armchair in front of the TV. I asked if she was hungry. She said no. So I sat on the couch, put on my headphones, and started watching Twitch streams. The first day dragged by. By evening, we'd eaten dinner. I fed great-grandma, helped her to the bathroom, then suggested bedtime. It was about 8 p.m. She lay down in her bed. I tucked her in, turned off the light, and closed the door. Finally, I was free, but I had nothing to do. I chatted with friends, streamed for a bit, then fell asleep on the living room couch. I slept hard, until a sudden loud noise from the TV woke me. I grabbed the remote and turned it off. Time to go to my room, I thought. Passing Maria's bedroom, I decided to peek in to make sure she was sleeping. I quietly cracked the door and saw her bed empty. My heart stopped. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Then I felt her beside me, silently, from behind. "Maria, what are you doing?" "Go lie down," I said, horrified. Nobody had warned me she could wander. She shuffled back to bed, mumbling in nonsense. I closed the door and returned to my room, determined to sleep. But I could hear her talking to herself in that made-up language all night. It was terrifying, though I eventually drifted off. I dreamed I was paralyzed. She stood in the doorway watching me. I woke up early, drained, and went to the kitchen for water. I thought Maria was still sleeping, but when I checked her room, the blanket was on the floor. She was lying fully clothed in a jacket over her nightgown, eyes wide open, staring at me. I froze. Dementia can be horrifying. I took off her jacket, helped her wash up and use the bathroom, then made breakfast and fed her. I sat her in her armchair and turned on the TV. The day passed just like the previous one. In the afternoon, Mom called, worried how things were going. I told her about last night and she was stunned. She'd never known Maria could get up on her own. I assured her I was fine. I put on headphones and closed my eyes, enjoying some music. 10 minutes later, I smelled something funny. I opened my eyes and nearly screamed. Maria was standing right in front of me. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice shaking. She said nothing. "Do you need the bathroom or want to sleep?" Silence. I guided her back to her chair and lay down, fully awake this time, watching her. Soon she started muttering again. I put in my headphones to drown out her words. I was so unnerved that I was already scared to be alone with her at night, not because of her, but because of what the dementia was doing to her mind. That evening, I fed her. Mom called. They'd buried Grandma and would be home tomorrow. At that moment, we were sitting at the table and great-grandmother started shaking her hand and spitting out food. I hung up. She was trying to tell me something again, as if she understood that I was talking to my mother about Grandma, as if she understood that her daughter had died. I put her to bed and lay awake in my room. At around 11 p.m., I heard noises from the kitchen. I thought Maria had wandered again. I crept through the dark hallway to check. No one was there. I peeked into her room. Maria was asleep. I didn't understand the sound, so I returned to my bed. I slept until 3 a.m., shaken by some vague feeling. I opened my eyes and knew I wasn't alone. I smelled that same stale, sickly odor. I turned and saw her. Maria was standing by the window, silent, staring at me. I sat up. She screamed, but this time I wasn't scared. I covered her with a blanket and hugged her. She went silent. "Come on, back to bed," I whispered. I sat with her all night, and around 6 a.m., I dozed off right in her chair. Mom's footsteps woke me. She asked if everything had been okay. I nodded and pointed to Maria's bed. She was lying still, not breathing. Maria died that night. I think she'd been waiting for me to be there. I felt sorry for her, but at least in her final moments, she was no longer afraid.